Ani Hello, đây là Ani Bọ Bồ Hi học say tự mi ở e Hawalata Wai Su In. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Sylvester. My Indian name is Bong, which means flower road, and I am of the Pueblo of Jemez from New Mexico, and I am of the Eagle Clan. I serve as the Senior Tribal Advisor and Liaison within the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and I manage the DoD Native American Lands Environmental Mitigation Program. Thank you so much for joining us in this first session of a three-part webinar series highlighting Native Hawaiian affairs. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our DNEX Native American Affairs webpage. Before we move on, I would like to introduce and call upon Mr. Ron Tickle, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Environmental Management and Restoration, to say a few words as well as introduce our special guests. So further, that's the Tickle's portfolio includes overseeing environmental planning and conservation, which includes natural and cultural resources, Native American affairs, NEPA, environmental planning, fire and emergency management, and oversees environmental compliance. In addition, his portfolio includes environmental restoration and compliance, emerging chemicals, the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program, also known as REPI, and the Armed Forces Pest Management Board. Mr. Tickle, thank you so much for being here with us. Over to you.
Can you see and hear me? Hello, this is Ron Tickle. Alicia, can you hear me?
Sir, yes, I can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Okay, let me try the camera here. I do not see where to turn the camera on, unfortunately.
Okay, let me see here.
Can you make Mr. Tickle the host?
If you can hear me, I can go ahead. Unfortunately, I'm sorry you can't see me.
Yes, sir. Go ahead and proceed.
Okay. Let me close that. It should be okay. I'm sorry for that problems. Yes. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My organization, the department, is responsible for helping DoD components fulfill their federal trust responsibilities to Native Americans, in addition to obligations to Native Hawaiian organizations, as outlined in federal laws and policies, and in Department of Defense Instruction 4710.03, consultation with Native Hawaiian organizations. It is my hope that today's webinar, Navigating Nuances, Practical Insights for Engaging with Native Hawaiian Communities, will assist all of us in building cultural competence and effectiveness in cultural interactions with Native Hawaiian communities. We aim for this session to provide a foundational understanding of Native Hawaiian culture, improve sensitivity in cultural interactions, and support ethical and professional practices in Hawaii. We are very fortunate to have collaborated with today's featured speaker, Ms. Kualani Ke'oho Kalole. Ms. Ke'oho Kalole leads Hawaii-based consulting firm People Strategies Hawaii. She brings 20 years of community engagement experience to her work building bridges between institutions and communities, built off her foundational cultural upbringing in the traditional Native Hawaiian cultural practice of Ho'oponopono, which if I properly pronounced means mediation or peacekeeping. Since 2022, she has been a principal instructor for our DoD-sponsored in-person Native Hawaiian cultural communications and consultation course held annually for civilian and military personnel based in Hawaii. Koholane, mahalo nui. Thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to your presentation, and thank you.
Well, hello, Mr. Tickle. I just want to check to make sure everyone can hear me okay. Great.
All good.
Okay, great. I'm going to be sharing my, oh, if you could enable my screen share. I'll share my screens in a second. And while we do that, I am just really honored to be here with all of you I've had the opportunity to present, I think 2 years in a row now, to the DoD and the Indo-PACOM here in Hawaii, and just really grateful to have this opportunity to present to all of you. I believe I might need to be made the host to.
I just
yes,
made
thank
you host.
Thank you. Okay. Let me. Can everyone see my screen? Yes. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to be talking about navigating nuances, practical insights for engaging with Native Hawaiian communities. I am Native Hawaiian. I'm born and raised in Hawaii and lived in Hawaii for most of my life. I actually spent some time in DC and the East Coast, but for the most part, Hawaii is my home. Or a chant to set our intent for learning together here today. E ho mai ho mai ki mai na mai o na me na no e ho na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai. This oli, this chant, is called E ho mai, and this is a common oli that Native Hawaiians will use to ask our ancestors for wisdom when we're about or embark on something. And I just wanted to start with this because it's a central tenet of our values to really set intent before we do anything and to ask our ancestors for wisdom, for knowledge, for power. So I want to start with that. And then moving right into our agenda. Today we're going to be, I started with setting intentions, do some introductions, and talk about what is a Hawaiian worldview. How does it differ from perhaps our typical way of looking at the world? And then how might that inform practices of working and engaging in Native Hawaiian communities? And then ask you folks for your takeaways and things that you hope to apply, and open for any questions and answers. So I'll start with some introductions. We call it ho'olauna, or it's a chance to really kind of share space with each other. So as I mentioned, I grew up here in Hawaii. My grandmother is Native Hawaiian. She's also been here generations, and she's really the one who instilled Hawaiian values in me. It was mentioned in my background. My grandmother was a cultural practitioner of ho'oponopono, which is a mediation and reconciliation practice in our culture. So my grandmother worked with a lot of other people in our indigenous community to really try and reconcile. A lot of families, have faced disruption, health issues, educational disparities, you name it. And so my grandma really the one working directly with families and communities to try and bring restoration and peace. And fast forward to 2015, you'll see a picture of me there with a group of people. So I actually kind of moved into my grandmother's footsteps. And while I don't do exactly what she did with families, one of my, I think, pivotal roles in my career was actually in the same organization that my grandmother did, but working internally inside the organization, focused on capacity building, training, and those sorts of things, which kind of led me to the work I do today, working with organizations and consulting. So I say that because in Hawaii, we don't start our introductions with ourselves, really. We always kind of take you back a bit and share and bring someone else into the space, a family member, an ancestor, a mentor, a leader. And I'll share a little bit more about our understanding of leadership and humility in Hawaii and why critical. But I wanted to start with my own introduction, because as you'll find in working in Native Hawaiian communities, it's really tough to start any sort of work without personally understanding each other. And this is beyond titles and accolades and degrees and all of those things. It's really about who are you? Where does your people come from? Who are you as a person? So I'd like to now engage all of you and ask you to please write in the chat, where are you from? And who would you bring into this space with you? Maybe it is an ancestor, a grandparent, a parent. Who might you want to learn along with you in this space? And of course, I don't mean literally, but figuratively, who would you bring into this space with you? So go ahead and share that in the chat, please. I'm gonna give you folks about another 30 seconds to get that in. You can probably tell that I like to facilitate on Zoom things, so I like to make use of the chat. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't think coming in, but I hope you all are seeing it on your end and being able to know a little bit more about each other. And again, this is so important in our culture, is to get to know each other on a human level, on a personal level, but understanding who is it that we surround ourselves with? Who is it that makes it possible for us to be here? Okay, so keep us moving here. Part of what you're gonna experience here in my session today is what I'm calling the Hawaiian worldview, and it's our way of operating. And so one of the things that my grandmother taught me through Ho'oponopono is this concept of form versus essence. So, and this is something that, you know, many Hawaiian cultural practitioners understand. So form would be the what, right? It's the structure, it's the format of things, the method, the tools that we use, the techniques. But essence is really the being. It's the how, it's the process, it's the way we go about things, it's values that inform what we're doing. And in Hawaii, in Hawaiian culture, you need to have both. It's not one or the other, but I would say we lean really heavily on essence. So I share this because sometimes with leaders that I consult who are coming into work in Hawaii, they have an agenda, they have things they need to accomplish, they have goals, they have, you know, this checklist of things they need to get done, and they want to go about it in a very form kind of way. Okay, let's, you know, gather community, let's have them have a listening, let's do a listening session, and, you know, we have the agenda and it's done. And they forget about the essence, how that you are approaching people, how communication coming across. When people enter this space, what are they first? It's kind of a joke because it's not just about the eating, but it's about the sense of like sharing a meal and convening, right? Meal with someone. It starts to engender trust. Like, I can trust you, I can let my guard down and eat a meal with you. And so is there food, you know, and I kind of joke, but like, is it good? You know, Safeway or something. No shade to Safeway, but like, you know, we care about, and I think this goes back to, and I'll talk about this in a bit, is intention, right? How much intention and what kind of intention you put into what you're doing, or is it just a matter of the box? You know, the consultant said to bring food, we got check. Really about what is essence that you are bringing. So I want to just establish that, because
Cool. I think we're having some issues with you freezing and hearing. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. There's a little bit of like freezing going on there.
Uh-oh. Ah, okay. Let me
I
see if
I can hear you now, but apparently
I
the
can switch.
chat function is not working. So if folks did put in their in the where they're from and who they're bringing in the Q&A section.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
I apologize. I don't know if it was my Wi-Fi or let me just try and get us back going here. Okay. Alicia, if you're the only person I can see, so if you can give me a thumbs up that you can see this and you can hear me okay. Okay. And maybe what was the last thing that you heard me saying or need me to repeat?
Mention of food.
Oh, okay. Yes. So I was saying that in Hawaii, we really care about gathering around food, and not just because we like eating, but because what bringing food and sharing food symbolizes, right? It allows people to let down their guard, to feel like they can trust you, to build relationship. And so I was just sharing that when you come into Hawaii, having food in meetings, although it might seem kind of trivial, is really important as just one example of how we set intention and create space such that people feel welcome. And I was mentioning that, you know, it's not just a matter of just like kind of grabbing pastries from the grocery store as a sort of a, okay, check the box, but really about, again, how intentional are you being? For example, sometimes people will go as far as to even find food from that place. Like if you're holding a meeting in this particular rural community, where is a place that's in that community that people really care about, that is symbolic of, you know, that place? So again, thinking about the intention, thinking not just about form where we're just kind of checking the box, but really the essence. What's the essence we're bringing? So throughout today's session, I'll be trying to demonstrate and talk about both. And I just want to get a thumbs up that you heard all of that and we're good. Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Okay, so this brings me to another central tenet of our value system, which is the idea of lokahi, or oneness or balance. So in our worldview, and I think this goes along for a lot of indigenous communities, we people see ourselves on the same plane as land. We see land as our ancestor. And I'll talk a bit more about our connection to land, but we don't see ourselves as above land, you know, or vice versa. So we see ourselves in line with land, and we also see us and our land connecting to our gods and our ancestors and our elders. So they're all up there above us, and then land, sky, ocean, and people are all kind of on the same plane. And we all have a inextricable tie to each other. So the health, the well-being, all of that is connected, and that is what for us creates a sense of balance. So even today in, you know, 2024, for many of us Native Hawaiians who have white collar jobs and work in, you know, offices, you'll often hear us talk about how if we're not feeling well, it's because we need to go back to the ocean, or because we need to go back to the land and work in the aina or land. So we truly believe that our connections to these things are critical to our own, our own health and well-being. So when you think about Hawaii's ecosystem and you think about going back thousands of years, our people lived here for millennia, you think about a thriving ecosystem that went from the mountain to the ocean, and we call this our ahupua'a system, or our watershed system. So we think about people who worked in the uplands, who were responsible for the forest, who were raised in the forest, who took care of the trees and the birds and the rivers that lived there. And then you think about the streams that kind of went in between, and the rivers that connected the mountains down to the ocean. And then you think about our ancestral oceans, our fish ponds, where we gathered our fish. You're looking at a over 200-year fish pond that's in my community. And this is how we survived. We survived completely off of the land and off of a working system with each other, understanding that we only exist here because of the land and because of our ancestors. And so we had many spiritual practices that help to honor our deities or our gods that we believe come to us in the form of the ocean, the rains, the rivers. You'll find that there are, just in my tiny community alone on the island of Oahu, there are tens of thousands of rains. And we have names for every single type of rain, every single type of wind, every single rock. We have names. And so we don't see these things as objects. You know, I just said things, but we don't see them as objects. We really see them as our relatives. We really see them as people, you know, on the same level as people, and our ancestors. So now this takes me to aloha aina, and this is a phrase that you'll hear a lot. I think especially as it relates to the relationship with the military, I will be honest, has been very tenuous, and in many ways because of the love for land, right? And you'll find that, like I mentioned, you know, land is a central component to who we are as people. It's even how we understand our identity. So for many of us, the story of our origin as Hawaiian people isn't when we sailed over from Tahiti to Hawaii. The story of our origin is the plant that you're looking at. This plant, the taro plant, kalo, as we call it, had a name. It was Haloa. And Haloa, the story of Haloa is that Sky Father and Earth Mother came together and had a baby, and that baby was stillborn. So they planted it in the earth and it became Haloa, which is this plant that you're looking at. And then they had a second child, and the second child was Haloa Nakalau Kapolili, who is our older brother. It's the first Kanaka, or first human. So, you know, we see the kalo plant as our older sibling, our eldest sibling, and that we come from the plant. We come from kalo. And I think in a Western context, it sounds really crazy and it doesn't make any sense. But in an indigenous sense, it makes total sense. And there are so many metaphors and analogies that we use with this plant in terms of the way that it grows, the way that it multiplies. We talk about our people in relation to that. We use a lot of symbolism and say, you know, the way that these tiny little sprouts come off of this plant are the same ways that we grow our children. The same way we plant this plant in the earth is the same way we plant ourselves and our children in the earth. So we very much see all of this, you know, sort of parallel and same on the same level as ourselves. My slide is blank. I don't know if it's blank on your side. Hopefully that's just a little. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so I want to take a minute to just kind of help us to maybe start to flesh out like the differences in how our sort of typical modus operandi, like how we might come into Hawaii and how we might be thinking about things, and then how we might need to shift our perspective from a Hawaiian perspective, right? So one thought might be like, land is a commodity. Like in the United States, land is a thing to obtain. We all want the American dream. We want to buy a home, have land, right? But in a Hawaiian worldview, land is our ancestor. It's not something to buy. It's not something to trade or make profit off of. It's something that is precious to us and we belong to it, really. Maybe on this side, it would be like, we can care about land and we can steward it, and we might do recycling or beach cleanups or those kinds of things. And in a Hawaiian worldview, we cannot survive without stewarding land, because it's not only that we steward it, but the land stewards us. We truly believe that it's like, because land stewards and cares for us, we are responsible to steward and care for the land. And then maybe, you know, we think, well, we'll tell the land what to do. Like, we make decisions about the land. We have insights that impact land. We know certain things. We have expertise, and so that impacts the way we think about land. And in Hawaiian worldview, it's the land actually is the one with the insights that teaches us and decides things for us. My children go to a Hawaiian immersion charter school, and one of the first things they teach the children from a very young age is what they call kilo. And kilo means to observe the weather and observe the weather patterns, and to like, they teach them from like 3 years old to understand the rains, the winds, what the particular clouds mean, and all of that. And so even young children at that age have an understanding that you're not going to plant on a certain day, because that day, like the planting on that day will not be, the crops will not be successful. It might be, if you know it's a particular moon, that is the moon to reconcile. That is the moon that tells you that it's time to go make peace with someone. Or if we have this particular weather, it means that it's time for war, or it's time for peace, right? So all of the land is what gives us the insights. It's not the other way around. And then lastly, I think I said this already, but this belief of like land belongs to us, and in a Hawaiian worldview, we belong to the land. I'm sure as I'm going, there are questions coming up, so please jot those down, and I'm going to leave time at the end for questions and answers and do my best. I do want to say that I just want to pause here and give a little disclaimer that I don't consider myself an expert or even you know, traditional cultural practitioner. I'm sharing things that I learned and have been passed down to me. But I'll do my best to answer your questions, and then also maybe help to point you to some resources as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is relationships. We call it pilina. Pili means to be close. It means to stick. And we even have a pili grass in Hawaii. But pilina, so when you add na to something, it is like the ing in English. So it's like the sticking of, or the connecting to. So in Hawaii, if you've ever been here, you know that one of our other pastimes is what we call talking story. We love to talk story. Talking story means talking with no agenda. It's just getting to know people. It's just telling stories. It's just sitting around and learning from each other and sharing and laughing. And so it's one of the things we do very often. In this picture, you see a group that I brought together. It's emerging Native Hawaiian leaders around the table, and then a culture practitioner. He makes ohe kapala, which are like wooden bamboo stamps. And so he's teaching them about that. They're talking story, they're listening to him. This is another example of a meeting. This is a strategy meeting that I was facilitating. And you'll notice, just like look at the furniture and the way that people are sitting and they're gathered around. It's not like your typical sitting around a boardroom kind of thing. And these are all executive directors of nonprofit organizations in Hawaii. But this is the way we like to talk, is to just gather around. Here's another picture of a group of funders and a group of residents from Lahaina who are talking about the wildfires and how they really have dreams and hopes for their community. And they're gathering around food. You know, I'll share that the funder group, they most of them were not from Hawaii, and they thought that they were just gonna like have a meeting, like just a typical meeting. And I tried to encourage them, like, do it over food, have that connection, build that pilina, right? And that's exactly what happened here. And it was beautiful to witness it, really, to them just getting to know each other. And this is a picture from last year in our DoD course, and an opportunity for, you know, military folks who are in the military and folks who aren't in the military, and just folks kind of connecting and talking story across. So that's really important to us, and we value that so much. And I think Western culture does too, but sometimes the approach might be a little different. So when we think about maybe our typical way of going about things might be like, relationships are important, but you know, sometimes you break off relationships, we can kind of survive with independently. And in Hawaiian worldview, like, we cannot survive without relationships. You will see whole families move their family all the way across the country and go live in enclaves together because they just don't want to be too far away from their family. You know, for us, even getting off of the islands to California is a 4-hour, 5-hour flight. It's thousands of miles away. And so, you know, for many of us, we will move away. I told you I went to the East Coast, but we will always feel a sense of longing and missing our family and our land. Sometimes in more like a US kind of culture, it's like my success is because of my hard work and my individual achievement. And I, rose the ranks and climbed the ladders and I earned it. And in Hawaiian culture, it's my success is inextricably tied to the collective successes of my family and community. So even if I went off and I got a college degree, I got some good job, that pales in comparison to, is my community doing well? What am I doing to use that degree to advance my community? What am I doing to make sure that my family is well and taken care of? Maybe a typical way of thinking is like, we might build relationships, especially when you don't know someone and you're trying to get something accomplished. You might come into Hawaii thinking like, okay, let's build relationships because we have to get this thing done. And in Hawaiian worldview, it's building relationships for the sake of building relationships. Like, yes, something might come out of that, but we are just hoping that we're building a relationship with you. Like, I will say I've now met Alicia twice over the last 2 years doing the course. And I feel like I have a relationship with her that's not based on work. It's just we connect, and that's beautiful. And so that's kind of how, when you think about growing up on an island, like, you absolutely cannot burn bridges with people and expect to never see them again. On an island, you are going to see people. They're going to know your grandmother. They're going to have worked with your parents. They're going to have been your kid's doctor or those sorts of things. And so just think about, when you're coming to Hawaii, you're coming to a tiny island community where everyone almost knows everyone. We joke that there's 1 degree of separation usually. And so relationships are really key to us. Okay, and then I think this is like my last cultural value or tenet that I'm going to share. And this is ha'aha'a, or cultural humility. So this, what you're seeing, is a picture of slippers, or you might call them flip-flops, in front of someone's home. And this is also, I think this comes a lot from Asian culture as well. There's been an influence here in Hawaii of that, where you take your shoes off before you go into someone's home. It's very, very common. It's actually considered very rude here to walk in the house with footwear on. But part of what I like to share about this, and why to me this represents cultural humility, is that even if that's not your practice, that's not your culture or way of doing things, the fact that you take your shoes off to go into someone's home shows them that you're being respectful of their culture, and you're being humble, and you're willing to kind of do that, right? So that's that same concept of taking off your way of doing things to understand, or to be willing to learn, or maybe even sometimes acquiesce to another culture's way of doing things, is totally what works really well here in Hawaii. It's coming in with that sense of humility and that willingness to learn. And I don't know what happened to my other slides, but this is a grainy picture. I was actually trying to find a picture of what typically happens at the end of parties. And the best I got was this. I took a screenshot of a video because, and I was kind of laughing with some of my friends, like, how come I can't find a picture? We all know this happens, but I can't seem to find a picture of people cleaning up after a party. And they said, because nobody stands around taking pictures of people cleaning up after a party. In Hawaii, the belief is if one person is working, everybody is working. And it's this concept of laulima, or all hands working together. And so it doesn't matter who you are. If you are the host of the party, I don't care if you have a very high title, the whole belief is that we're all in this together. Again, small island community, right? So at the end of parties, you'll even see, or gatherings, events, meetings that you might host even, the whole idea is that everybody stays to clean up. Even my own wedding, all my guests just immediately started helping. My mother-in-law made a comment that like, oh, the venue needs us to clean up by a certain point. And everybody helped close up the folding chairs and the tables and all of that stuff. So that's just how it is in Hawaii, is everybody works together, all hands supporting. And that to me represents our culture of humility. So some thoughts that we have about humility, and I took this from really when I worked with leaders and organizations, sometimes, especially those who are trying to do more work in Hawaii, I try to help them understand like the Western ways that you might think about humility and expertise, and like your willingness to be vulnerable and not know all the answers. What you might have been taught is just kind of not necessarily going to work here. So for example, this notion that it's important to establish your expertise. I remember I was working with someone who came in from the continent, from the mainland. That's the other thing, we call it the continent, because Hawaii is our mainland. But having someone come in from the continent and wanted to spout off all of their degrees and their experience and their expertise and why you should listen to me. And it was like, right off, you've turned everybody in the room off without even knowing it. Like now no one is listening. Because for us, it's so important to establish your humility right off the bat in your very first communication, in your very first meeting, your very first approach. It's, are you showing that you're willing to take off your slippers and come through the door humble and willing to learn and listen from us? So along with that, it's the thought that like people will only trust and believe me if they know that I'm the expert and they know that I bring all of this knowledge and expertise with me. And in Hawaii, it's like, absolutely not. Actually, it's people will only trust and believe you if they think that you're willing to learn and to listen. Now, that's not to say that knowledge and expertise are not needed, of course, because, okay, you're willing to learn and listen. Now, what are you going to share? But I think that mode of kind of coming off the bat and trying to establish yourself as an expert, it can really fly in the face of being effective as someone who wants to influence or wants to create change or whatever it is you're trying to do here, really showing your willingness to learn and listen. And then another concept is like that maybe lowering yourself is a sign of weakness, right? Like, well, I can't take out the trash at the party or the meeting. They can't see me, you know, raking or sweeping or, you know, I don't know, whatever it is, right? They can't see me be the one like serving coffee at the meeting because that would make me look inferior. It might in certain contexts, but in Hawaii, that actually is a sign of strength. We look for leadership in terms of servant leadership here in Hawaii. So it's really important to establish yourself as someone who's willing to serve others. That shoots you right to the top in terms of how people here view you as a leader, as someone to respect. Yeah, I can't say more about how, you know, trying to establish yourself as someone who's like, you know, requires all the respect and commands respect and doesn't lower yourself, how that actually lowers you in our perspective. So I hope this is helping to kind of make that distinguish that difference. Okay, so I've shared a lot, and I'd love to kind of start to think about, so what implications might this have? You know, okay, cool, Lenny, you've shared a lot of values with us and the worldview, but like, what would this mean for our work in Hawaii? Oh, sorry. Okay, so the first thing, as I mentioned, right, starting with intention. So this requires you actually asking yourself and yourself as a team, as a group, whoever is going to be working with Native Hawaiians. And frankly, I just think this is good human practice anyway, but what is the purpose? What are we trying to do? And being really clear about that for yourself, right? And if you find that that intention kind of doesn't jive with some of the other things I've said about Hawaiian worldview, then you may need to kind of take a step back. For example, if your purpose is, well, we need to go in there and establish this and let them know that we're the experts and that's our purpose, then maybe my next question is like, so why would this community care about that, right? What does that do for them? And so just to be mindful of that, and then also to be super intentional, continue to embed your intentionality throughout. So in everything you do, think about, how do we be intentional? How do we be intentional, right? Like I was saying, and I know it might sound trivial, but the kind of food that you're like having food and then the kind of food that you're serving, even how you set up a meeting or set up an approach. Do you have a talking head at the front of the room and everybody else is supposed to just sit there and be quiet? Are you putting people in a circle so that they feel more equal, they feel more seen? You know, are you offering ways for people to give you feedback and to have it be a two-way dialogue where people from Hawaii feel like you care about what they have to say and their expertise and knowledge? Are you honoring those who came before? Those kinds of things. So to really be intentional about everything you're doing. Okay, second, when you're doing introductions, the way we did today in the chat, the way you did, try to emphasize connections to place and people. And sometimes I'll see speakers from the continent come to Hawaii and they'll say something like, I love Hawaii. I went to Waikiki there one year on vacation and had a great Mai Tai, you know, and like, that doesn't really do much for us. But saying that you've been here and, you know, and then like something that tells us that you care about this place and its people beyond just like the fun vacation you might have had and the booze cruise you might have gone on. Like, what do you care about this people, our people, and this place, right? Make us know that you care about this place. And it's not about titles, accolades, or expertise. Those are great to have, but that's not what you would lead with. You really want to lead with your connection to this place and the care for our people. The next tip I would have is go slow to go fast. One leader I was working with, she said, you know, I get really frustrated because every time I say the meeting is going to start at 9 o'clock and people get there at 9:05 and 9:15 and they're like dragging in and then they're grabbing coffee and they're talking and then we don't actually get started till like 9:30, 9:45. And I've got a whole list of things to go through. And I tried to explain to her, as I've shared here, that for us, the relationships, the how, the essence is more important than the task, the what we need to get done. And not only is it more important to us, but you're not going to be effective. You're not actually going to get to your agenda. You're not going to get buy-in until and unless you make that time and the space for relationships and you honor that. So what I suggested to her was start your meeting earlier. Start it at 8:45 or even 8:30, right? And to say, and even say on your agenda, create a line item on your agenda that says 8:30 to 9 o'clock is coffee, networking, connections, relationship building. Like intentionally build it in so that you know that that's what you're doing, but also like that you understand and you honor for them that that's important to them. So go slow to go fast. Allow that time for relationship building and know that that's the way that you're going to earn trust. It's not just something that's handed out because you came with a certain type of expertise. It's really something that needs to be earned. I think I've said this a lot, but the process or the how is as important as the what. And so balance this need to do and to go and to accomplish and achieve with this essence of being in community, of being in place and honoring where you are. Okay, and I think this is my last tip, and then I'm opening it up for questions. But culture of humility, admitting what you don't know, not being boastful about your skills or talents or expertise, it really goes very far. It helps to establish you as a credible leader, as someone people can trust and they can listen to. Okay, so that's a lot, and I think we have some time now. Oh, let me go forward. Let me go to questions, and then I wanted to end with knowing your folks' takeaways. So let's open it up for questions. Yeah.
Okay, folks, I think you can put in your questions in the Q&A section, or any comments other than, you know, if you don't have questions, that would be great as well.
Okay, I now see the folks were answering earlier in the Q&A because I guess the chat wasn't working. So thank you. Oh, I love seeing those. Okay, I see a raised hand. I don't know how to accept it.
Okay, Kate or Terry, can you?
Who's raising a hand?
I don't see a raised hand.
I don't see one.
Oh, okay, maybe not anymore.
Please feel free to raise your hand, and I can allow you to talk. Just keep your hand up, and I will enable your audio.
Okay, there is a question from Kristen Mountjoy. Thank you so much for this. It's been very informative. My question is for planning such events. Do you think it is wise to ask the communities you are planning to meet with to help in the planning and development of a consultation meeting?
Absolutely. 1000% yes. Yes. That's going to be so critical. You know, I'll be honest, I do that too myself, like even being Native Hawaiian from here. And that's also, I guess, another point to make is that Hawaii is not a monolith. I mean, ethnically, we're very diverse, but also geographically, even on these small islands, we are very diverse. So even a community 30 minutes from mine will have a very different way of doing things. They might have, well, not might, I'll share that each community kind of has like its leaders, its elders that they look to as like, this is the elder of this place. And so even like asking people, so who would that be? You know, who are the community leaders in this area that I should talk to, get to know, share what our intentions are, and get their thoughts on, you know, what should we do for this meeting. That goes a long way because they can give you advice and support you in the design, that things that you might not have even thought of. Yeah, that's
And
a great question.
I also suggest reaching out to perhaps ask them to come up with an agenda, you know, or help you draft the agenda so that they do have a say.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I don't see any other questions. I guess anything coming up for you, Alicia or Terry?
Yes. So in August, we are planning to host an in-person DoD Native Hawaiian Culture Communications and Consultation course. So that will be the week of August 17th for 2 days action officer course and a half a day executive session. So be on the lookout for a flyer that will be coming out shortly here.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I think I will just close us out to ask you for some of your takeaways. So if you haven't had a chance to write in the chat or Q&A yet, I would love to hear any takeaways that you are walking away from today with, or you might be able to raise your hand and verbally share. What are you taking away from today? I'm just very curious. It's always good to, you know, I don't like talking at people and then not knowing what they what they got from it. So if you could share if chat's not working, maybe the Q&A is fine, but one thing that you're taking away from our session. Oh, okay. I think I see Kristen.
Kristen, I think you've been unmuted.
Allow access. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about this. Technologically challenged here. I just want to thank you guys. What I'm taking away, which has been incredibly helpful to me, is understanding that community approach to the meeting and and gathering and making sure your leadership. So like many of us that are probably attending this webinar are more in the subject, when I say subject matter expert, we're like a cultural resource or a natural resource environmental person that then advises leadership, who are of course responsible for the installation, whatever they may be bringing as an issue to the communities. But making sure that you, as in our role, that we brief our leadership and the people who are participating in a community event with our consultation on this approach of being everyone's going to work together. We're all going to participate in whatever it is, even if it's cleaning up. And also kind of reaching out and doing early planning with the community and seeing if maybe even they would like to help sort of provide some background to the leadership that may participate. It's really just very useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah. And I love that of, sharing this back with your leadership, because I have seen some missteps, I will say, with folks who get it, and then sometimes their leaders like don't get it, or they didn't get the briefing. And that can be a misstep, right? That could easily been avoided had they just understood that this is like the way of operating here in Hawaii. Great.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, any other takeaways or questions? And I see I'm just looking at what people wrote earlier. We did have a couple people who are actually from Hawaii, so aloha and thanks for being here. I see we have someone from Austin, Texas and Illinois. Yeah, so really grateful for you all coming.
What I'm taking away is that, to be careful in what you say and what you do, because that can lead to a lasting impression, not only about you as a person, but as the whole, perhaps a company or program or agency that you represent. Because the community is very small and word does get around rather quickly.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we like to say people from Hawaii have a long memory. So we remember things even from, 100 years ago, because stories get passed down. We're an oral culture, right? So sometimes it might be like, oh, my grandma told me about you, or I heard that this thing had happened, dozens of years ago, but I still remember it. So yes, it's really important. And I can't tell you how many times I've had like people in my life circle back, so maybe I knew them when I was in preschool or something. And then, now I'm turning 40 and I might see them again and they're in my life in a different way. So that happen, it's really common for that to happen. And so just again, like trying not to burn any bridges is really important. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am going to be in that course this year. And so really look forward if anybody is coming to that. I also wanted to share a couple of, so I think Terry has a resource. Terry, I'm not sure if that went to everyone or maybe just to us, but there are a number of resources here in Hawaii, things to tap into. I would say the Native Hawaiian Hospitality Association, they have a lot of cultural resources, and also people who do like cultural kind of welcome to Hawaii types of training. Also, the University of Hawaii at Hilo has a number of resources, including understanding our language. So sometimes that can be a barrier too, because I didn't even talk about that, but if you like mispronounce things or, just have trouble phonetically spelling things out, sometimes it can feel like, oh man, like you didn't take the time to understand or how to say something, right? So that can be helpful, is to look into language. And now we even have Duolingo, the app, the language learning app, even has Hawaiian on it. So I would encourage you to even just take like a simple Hawaiian language 101 lesson, and that might help you to understand how to pronounce things as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last call for folks to ask questions or
I think there's a question in the Q&A box from Tim.
Yes. Okay, how can you productively balance the military community's need for accomplishment at meetings with the Hawaiian philosophy approach to meetings? Ooh, that's a really good question. So, sometimes I advise that, remember I said like go slow to go fast. So how fast you might have thought you would get through an agenda might not be what's appropriate, and the timing might not be right of that because of all the things I talked about, right? Establishing humility, relationships, all of those things. And so I would advise that you think about like, how are we just establishing a relationship, period, in the very first meeting? How are we establishing a relationship with people and showing that we want to listen to them? And so maybe what it's going to mean is that your agenda is going to have to actually be spread out over multiple meetings, and pushing things out further so that it's not just accomplish, but it's a balance of form and essence.
yes, and as we always say, make sure you meet with the folks early, engage early, and not only go when your house is burning down or when you want something from someone. Get to know your neighbors, create that relationship.
Great advice, great question. Well, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ku'u. We'll see you again soon.
Okay, thank you. Malama pono. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.